In a world full of challenges, there are incredible people making a difference, one cause at a time. KFGO For A Cause, brought to you by Neil Van Dam and the Van Dam Financial Group. KFGO For A Cause shines a spotlight on organizations and individuals dedicated to positive change.
KFGO For A Cause, brought to you by Neil Van Dam and the Van Dam Financial Group. It is our third, but maybe technically second, because the first one it was just you and me, and I don't think that really counts, Neil.
I thought it was great.
It was fun. It was fun. Thanks for coming along with us. I know this is an early morning, 6 a.m. show, but maybe you're listening to us on a rerun of the podcast at KFGO.com. Either way, we're glad you're here and that you are standing beside Neil and I, learning about nonprofits in our area. Really, the genesis of KFGO For A Cause was just, we want to get to know the people that are making a huge impact on our community. And Neil said, I am right there with you. I know you've met with the Van Dam Financial Group. You have met a lot of these nonprofit partners in our community, and like me, are a little enamored with all the work that they do.
Yeah, just in the last half hour that we were talking before the show started, which we just kind of got into the details quite a bit, it's blown my mind already. So we didn't really have an agenda of this show, but now there's about 400 things that I want to try to cover in our 20-minute show here. So I'll introduce Erin. I'll let you kind of introduce yourself, and then tell us more about what's happening in our community with the YWCA.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having us, and thank you, KFGO, for doing KFGO For A Cause, and thank you to Neil for having us. The YWCA Cass Clay has been in the Fargo-Moorhead community a long time. We're really a stakeholder. We've been around since 1906 in our community, serving women and children who are having some sort of housing need. Years ago, we served as the place, before there were dormitories at our college campuses, women came here and were safely housed at YWCA while they furthered their education. Over the last, 40 plus years, we've really evolved into serving women and children who are escaping violent situations in their life and facing trauma and needing a safe place to be. And so we operate the state's largest domestic violence shelter right here in Fargo for serving all of North Dakota and Northwest Minnesota. In addition to that, we've really focused heavily on expanding our supportive housing program. Over the last 8 years or so, we've expanded from what was about 12 units when I first got to YWCA to 97 units of supportive housing across our community with many wonderful partners. And so each and every day, YWCA serves 350 women and children escaping violence and homelessness through our shelter and housing programs locally.
What does supportive housing mean? Like, when you say that, what does the typical person, what should they imagine?
In our case at YWCA, we offer a full continuum of housing and supportive services. So that might mean housing stabilization. That includes just helping pay someone's rent for a period of time while they get on their feet, and assign what we call an advocate, which many of you out in the community might see as a social worker or someone with a social justice type background. In addition to that, we have transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, all on a pathway we're hopeful that people live independently in the community again. And so supportive housing to us really means that there is an advocate and someone to walk alongside women as they continue on when they have nowhere else to go and no one else to turn to. Amy, you and I talk oftentimes about the amazingly nurturing environment that we grew up in with your mom and my folks. Not everyone has that opportunity. And I feel so fortunate to have had my mom and dad supporting me and saying, you can accomplish whatever you'd like. The unfortunate reality for so many of the women and children that we serve is that they don't have that supportive home life. And the very people who are supposed to love them are those that have sold them for sex, who've abused them, and have told them they're worthless. And so what supportive means to us is doing just that, supporting them on that pathway to healing and hope and independence.
So the sex trade, sex trafficking, that's something that comes up a lot, but the conversations that and forgive my ignorance, but that I have with the people I talk with is, but is that really happening in Fargo?
It It absolutely is happening in Fargo. You know, we've been a part at YWCA of something called the state's Human Trafficking Task Force, and in our region, the Red River Valley Human Trafficking Task Force, dating back to 2015. The intersections of I-29 and I-94 are major thoroughways. And so, you know, over time, especially during the oil boom, we were seeing many women trafficked throughout the community. More recently, that still is the case. Just last year, in 2024, YWCA served 109 trafficking survivors across all of our programs. And again, that sad reality is that 58% of those 109 were trafficked by their partner, where another 33% were trafficked by a family member. And so think about that just for a moment, about the very people who are supposed to love you are those selling you and selling your body. It's happening right here. Our partners across the community at YouthWorks and the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center and others are part of our task force. And we actually just met this, earlier this week about what we can do to work together to have really solid protocols so that we don't see more of that happening.
How do you even wrap your arms around being proactive about something like that?
We try to create a network of supporters where we're looking for and in training out there as part of the statewide human trafficking task force, where there's navigators embedded across each region of North Dakota, doing really solid training with law enforcement officials, with school educators, you name it. We're trying to get in front of them to help them understand what to look for in behaviors and words that might help identify victimization, because the average age of someone coming into being trafficked is 12 years old.
Wow.
Which is incredibly scary as a mother of a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, for all of us, but then thinking about that,
I mean, we think of the YWCA. I mean, I think when a lot of people think of the YWCA, Neil, and you can tell me, like, off the top of your head, as someone who has never really been intimately involved in the organization, I think most people think it's just an emergency shelter.
I think of a woman getting abused by her partner and leaves, but
right, and just needs shelter for a few days or nights or whatever, an emergency shelter. But your mission and what you've created at the YWCA is so much more. I mean, the emergency shelter is still, I think a pivotal thing of what you do. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but it's so much more than that now.
I would tell you the emergency shelter is part of our programming that I think will always be there, but we want that experience in homelessness to be as rare and brief as possible, and to be able to live independently out in their own home so that they can with their children, because a majority of the time a woman's coming with her children, escaping that violent situation. And so we want people to be able to move forward and have that sense of stability and routine in their own home, to create that environment that's safe for the future for them and their children. And so the average length of stay in shelter is about 45 days. What comes next? Well, what I was seeing when I first came to YWCA back in 2008 was women repeatedly coming through shelter after their 45 days were up. They'd have this makeup period in the cycle of violence, which is something in our work that is a term utilized quite frequently, in that then they would have this makeup period with that partner or that significant other, where they'd go back and they'd be in that honeymoon phase where things were going okay, and then we'd see them be re-victimized and need to come back to shelter. Well, they're going back because it's part of a cycle, but they also were going back because they didn't have income of their own or a means to support themselves. And it wasn't and isn't still today often because they don't want to get a job or this is what they want in their life. It's often because that's been controlled. There's this immense power and control in a domestic violence situation where women are told how to wear their hair. They're told who their friends can be. They get alienated from their family. They're told they can't hold down a job. Those kinds of things. So that control and that manipulation can take place. And so what we try to do through those supports, you asked me about supports earlier, part of that support is helping women recognize they're in that cycle in the first place, that there is someone who cares about them, and that there is a way and an organization with all of you as generous listeners here at KFGO and people throughout the community that care about them and want them to be able to move forward and not live where it's unsafe.
Yeah. Now, talk about sort of the infrastructure of the YWCA. I mean, it's not just an emergency shelter. We talked about that supportive of being all these different levels of housing. We also talked about it as it's a you're a people organization. You need a lot of people. You need a lot of advocates to work alongside all of these individuals and kiddos and to make sure everybody has what they need to become successful and to be in that next phase that they want to get to.
Right. Not only is the YWCA, as Neil said very nicely, it's the place for women and children to go when they're scared and have no place else to go. We walk alongside them at every turn. And so what we've attempted to build out at YWCA, like I said, in the last 8 or 10 years, really are those supportive housing units so people don't have to return to abusive partners and live where it's unsafe. And so today we offer 97 units of housing, which primarily is apartments through the addition of Grace Garden over in West Fargo, of Lantern Light, which we launched just, I guess, a year and a half ago now, where we renovated the Sisters of the Presentation Convent and have acquired additional property and then have scatter site apartments throughout the community as well, where women are living amongst the broader community with the supports of the YWCA. So for some women, that might look like some food support because as much as SNAP or what people would have used to have called food stamps, it doesn't last the whole month. And so they might be food supports. For others, it might be helping make certain that their child gets to their therapy appointment or gets to go to the eye doctor because they can't see the board any longer and their grades are suffering. It might look like rides to school. It might just be that supportive ear and sounding board for when that makeup period with that partner is there, that encouragement to not go back. It looks different in every circumstance because no one of us are the same. We all are unique and individualized. And so our approach is really to provide that individualization to every person. And each advocate carry a caseload of folks that are there to help and be well trained in response to trauma. And just being that sounding board and remind people that we care. Because I think oftentimes when someone is experienced violence or trauma or trafficking, they've been belittled and told they have no value and that no one cares about them and that they're worthless. And at YWCA, we see the value in every human being and want to help articulate from our community and all of you as listeners and you here at KFGO and across the network that we do care as a community. That I often say I have this front row seat to these awful, horrible things, and this is a hard topic on a Sunday morning, I know. And at the same time, I have this front row seat to the most generous people who care and are compassionate and want to make certain that services like ours are available.
Yeah. I mean, it really is amazing. Erin Prochnow, YWCA Cass Clay, right here in Fargo, has been with us. Neil Van Dam from the Van Dam Financial Group. I'm Amy Iler. You're listening to KFGO For A Cause, and we're going to be here every Sunday morning at 6 a.m., sort of giving you a peek into the nonprofits in our backyard. And Neil, I think you've even been schooled up today about the YWCA and their mission.
Well, and on our break, I was kind of nerding out about the financials a little bit, and Erin was explaining the difference between housing and shelter, and I think it'd be good for our audience if you would explain that.
Absolutely. I do this comparative piece with folks oftentimes to really compare emergency shelter to an emergency room in the healthcare system, where supportive housing really could be compared more to your primary care doctor or your doctor that you go see in the clinic. Because when people are coming to emergency shelter, they're in crisis. They need to be triaged really quickly. They need 24-hour care. If you're going to an emergency room, you've broken your arm, you're having a heart attack, you're having a crisis. That's what's happening when people are coming to emergency shelter. Now, if you go to your regular doctor, maybe you just have some high blood pressure. Maybe you just need your annual physical to understand and make sure everything's going okay. Same kind of thing happens in our housing program. And what we were talking about at the break a little bit was the cost comparison. And when we add up what it costs every night to provide one night of shelter at YWCA, it's $66 per night. It's $22 for a night of supportive housing. So it's 3 times the cost to provide that emergency care, just like emergency room care is far more costly. And I think people can understand that in their regular life. So not only is it more affordable to provide supportive housing, it's a better level of care, meeting people where they're at individually and helping them move their lives forward and provide that routine. So it's more affordable and from a service standpoint just makes more sense.
It doesn't make sense, I think, unless someone like you sort of spells it all out.
I think there's a place for shelter, certainly. And at the same time, at YWCA, we've been focused on building out housing because we think it is the solution to homelessness. And, I've been paying attention and engaged in the homeless discussion that's been happening across our community. And unless we're talking about housing, we're having the wrong discussion. That is absolutely the opinion of the YWCA. And that's why we've been so hyper-focused on building out supportive housing so that women and their children aren't re-victimized by abusive partners and having to move back into homes with them. It's that concept of the affordability factor and it making more financial sense. But in addition to that, it provides that pathway to a safe, secure environment where women and their kids can go to bed at night and know that they're not going to be victimized, that they can go do their homework at their kitchen table in a safe environment. And when they get up in the morning, lift their head off that pillow and get out to the bus stop, they know that someone's not going to harm them. And that sense of routine is there and they're going to go see the same teacher every day. And those are things that we strive for at YWCA. And while they may seem like really ordinary things to the general public, to someone who's lived in crisis and has experienced trauma, it's incredibly important to provide that sense of routine and stability and normalcy.
We also were talking on the break about how it's a tough, heavy subject for a Sunday morning. And there's probably someone listening going, well, what am I going to do to help? I mean, other than obviously everything that we do costs money, but what do we do?
I think the answer to that, and Amy, I've done this a long time at YWCA. I've been there almost 17 years now. And like I think I said at the break, I have this front row seat to the best of folks and them being generous and the absolute most awful front row seat to traumatic and horrible things. In all of these discussions we've been having recently across the Fargo-Moorhead community about homelessness, I think what we could offer each other most importantly, and my board's going to disagree with me because they're going to be like, Erin, you need to ask for money. But I think the answer is to ask for grace because we don't know what other people are facing. And, women who've been in abusive relationships, who are homeless and escaped violence, they need believers. They need people who believe in them. They need people who support them. And I think really good things can happen when compassionate people care about women and children and who are working to change the course of their lives. And so my answer to that is homelessness is often a result of trauma. Whether that's trauma women have experienced in their home as a child, being molested or abused, whether that is child sexual violence of someone who we've served, whether that's an abusive partner, whether it's emotional abuse, financial abuse, physical abuse, you name it, whether they've been trafficked, whether that's the veteran down the street whose trauma is far greater than any of us could ever know, or if it's that Native American neighbor who has experienced multiple layers of trauma. All of that in homelessness often comes from that place of trauma. And I think we need to, as a broader community, recognize that folks facing homelessness don't want to be homeless. This isn't a choice. This is a product of many circumstances. And so if we could provide that grace and be the champions and the believers, I think that's what I would ask for from our community.
Well said, but obviously you might need money or a volunteer along the way. So let's, as we end this, as we wrap this up, let's tell people how they can follow along with your journey, be a part of the YWCA. How can they get to know you more? How can they be involved in your mission?
I think people feel really good when they can give something tangible. And so our needs list is updated every week. It's out on our website at YWCACassClay.org. Shop on the Amazon wish list and send stuff right to the shelter or drop it off, but make certain it's one of the things we need. Whether that's pajamas or underwear or kids' boots right now. Those are the things that come to mind most readily at this particular moment. What we don't need are an abundance of used women's clothes that are just dropped on our door. That isn't what we need. Take those over to Savers, which is our community partner.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I don't think people know this, but take your clothes to Savers.
women at our shelter have the opportunity to go shop at Savers with a gift card, and then we get a kickback for every pound of clothing that is provided there. So please don't drop them off directly at, the things that aren't on our most needed list, go to Savers. The things that are on the need list, please bring to us directly, and don't try to mingle those things, because then our staff need to sort through those things. And so my other request is, please don't get angry when they don't want your garage sale items, because we have to have staff that sort that, and then that detracts from them being able to serve people in the shelter. And it's hard to say that out loud when you don't have a venue like this that's most helpful. Otherwise, engage with our events. Each year we host Woman of the Year in April. We host Chocolate for Change in September, and a variety of ways that you can help throughout the year by volunteering or engaging, whether that's yard work, whether that's cooking a meal, whether that's donating peanut butter, whatever that looks like to you. We're here and ready to accept your help, whether that's volunteerism, whether that's dollars, you name it. YWCACassClay.org has all those options.
Erin Prochnow, YWCA of Cass Clay, thank you so much for joining us. And Neil Van Dam with the Van Dam Financial Group, thank you so much for being here. We'll see you again next Sunday at 6 a.m. here on KFGO.